Let's focus on the Russian missiles that hit a large Ukrainian base, a military base near the border with NATO member Poland, killing 35 people and wounding 134, according to the latest reports. Britain said the incident just 25 kilometers from the Polish border marked a significant escalation of the conflict. To get the latest, we speak to SAB correspondent in Brussels, Rosie Bichard. Thank you for being with us, Rosie. So this attack very close to Poland is being seen as a symbolic, strategic move from Russia. What more can you tell us?
Absolutely. This is certainly, sorry, Francis, raising concerns here in Brussels. That's because NATO, the defensive alliance, is headquartered here, and Poland is a member of NATO, unlike Ukraine. Now, this attack being so close to the Polish border means that that's not only the border through which most refugees are fleeing Ukraine, it also marks the beginning of NATO territory and the beginning of that collective defence pledge known as Article 5, which says an attack on one is an attack on all. So this is certainly being seen, at least here in Brussels, as something that could be considered as escalatory and is raising concerns here because, of course, NATO until now has extremely been resistant toward any sort of involvement in this war, and that's why they have, for example, turned down Ukraine's request to initiate a no-fly zone over the country. The NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says doing so could lead to an even bigger war where NATO allies, including the United States and the United Kingdom, are facing down Russia, and that, he says, would lead to a bigger war with even greater human suffering.
Yeah. The Prime Minister of the UK says European security is shaken. Is that the general view? I guess Article 5, however, is not triggered until something lands within Polish territory.
Francis, you're quite right. Article 5 has absolutely not been triggered. What has been requested, at least in the last few weeks, is something called Article 4 consultations in NATO. Poland was among several countries requesting that, and that essentially says we feel our security is threatened. Not just that there's a distant threat, but that there is a threat to security. Now, NATO defence ministers will be meeting in Brussels on Wednesday. They will be meeting in person. However, they're not likely to be discussing any kind of direct support to Ukraine. As I said, they keep insisting there will be no NATO boots on the ground and no NATO planes in the skies. They are instead likely to be discussing how best to protect each other and how to really make sure that those allies who are on the eastern flank and who feel very exposed at this time feel secure.
Yeah, the Ukrainian president always calling for that no-fly zone, which won't happen anytime soon, like you say. There are attempts. We're hearing some softening of the rhetoric, even of the Russian president. People looking into the words he's been using, and a Russian representative reportedly saying there could be some sort of agreement on the cards. Do you have anything more to tell us? Are there hopeful signs?
Well, I can tell you, at least from the European perspective, the last EU leaders to have tried their hand at convincing Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire were French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. They were juggling the phones yesterday. They were on the phone to Vladimir Putin and before that on the phone to Volodymyr Zelensky. They did call for this immediate ceasefire. Now, given the events that we just spoke about with those strikes on that military facility near Poland, that call for a ceasefire does appear to have fallen on deaf ears. However, we did see earlier this week that first meeting of those foreign ministers from Ukraine and Russia, first time they'd met face-to-face since the conflict began, and the talks do appear to be moving forward in the sense that they are continuing. Whether or not there's any progress in there is hard to say. I'm afraid I'm not privy to that information. However, European Union and NATO officials both say they absolutely support a diplomatic solution. They support these talks going forward, and that is what they are absolutely pushing for.
And do they say they will simply keep on trying? I mean, the French president has been on the phone a lot, no fruit yet, but are they committed to continuing to try to reach out to the Russian president?
Well, we heard from the readouts of this call yesterday that the leaders had agreed to stay in touch, so it seems that those diplomatic efforts will continue. Francis, you mentioned French President Macron. He has long been seen as an advocate of dialogue with Russia, and of course he himself had been in the Russian capital before this war started to try and broker some sort of deal. That didn't seem to work out. As you said, those talks so far have not seemed to be able to bear fruit, but the efforts do continue, and they seem to be willing to try and keep them up and keep pressing for a diplomatic solution, however unlikely or difficult that might be.
All right, thank you for that update. SABC correspondent in Brussels for us, Rosie Burchard.
But the only thing left here is defiance.
Показали, що ми українці, ми нація, ми згуртовані, ми друг за друга стоїмо. Дай Бог, щоб швидше війна закінчилась і щоб люди остроїлись.
In Kherson, the first major city taken by the Russians, thousands of unarmed Ukrainians marched in fury at the occupation, shouting insults until Russian forces fired into the air. The protesters carried on anyway. The Russians also released aerial footage of their bombing campaign, claiming Ukrainian extremists are stopping civilians from using the humanitarian corridors to escape. It's a familiar Russian line used before in Syria. But the Russians also claim there's been significant progress at the peace talks. One delegate claimed a deal could be just days away. In the capital, President Zelensky visited soldiers in hospital to award honours. Though perhaps this is the honour any soldier wants now, more than a medal. The President's Chief of Staff said Ukraine will give up nothing at the talks, and that the Russians are listening, not giving ultimatums. If Russia hopes maximum pain equals maximum pressure, it is on full show in towns now pounded for over 2 weeks. The emergency teams say this was a school in Mykolaiv. And this was a hospital. For Dr. Galina Verona and others who missed the last evacuation buses from Volnovakha, home is now a bunker. Not even.
People were killed in the Kiev area today. What we do know is that there was certainly a serious artillery barrage. We heard it ourselves on the outskirts of Irpin, which is this town to the northwest. An American journalist, as you mentioned, called Brent Renault, a filmmaker. He was in a car, an unmarked car, with a colleague, and that car came under fire from what is believed to have been a Russian checkpoint. He was killed on the spot. His colleague is in hospital being treated now. The mayor of Irpin has said that journalists won't be allowed to go there anymore because it's too dangerous. But what about for the ordinary Ukrainian people there? Many of them are still stuck there. They're trying to get out, but it's almost impossible for them to move now because it's so dangerous. You also mentioned Mykolaiv. That's the southern port where we were last week. 9 people died in what the governor said was an air attack today. So as you can see, this war is becoming increasingly dangerous for civilians.
We have seen images today of many brave Russians daring to protest against the war and being bundled away, arrested by Russian security forces very promptly.
Russian forces have moved 5 kilometres nearer to Kiev in the past 24 hours, though it's not clear if an attack is imminent. The BBC's Mark Lobel has the latest.
Remember that stalled Russian convoy heading to the capital? It's now seemingly on manoeuvres, seen here in a forest. and in town. In what may be a renewed push, could it be readying for action? But further east, a separate Russian advance didn't get a warm welcome, under attack from the Ukrainian military. It's Ukraine's resistance, even in heavily besieged cities like Mariupol, that many fear will lead to Russia resorting to chemical weapons to win.
People can hide amongst the rubble. Ukrainian military can hide there, jump out.
More people leave their homes as fears of even nastier attacks grow. Russia accuses America of biological activities in Ukraine. Unproven claims they will air at the UN Security Council on Friday. America says the claims are laughable. Ukraine's President Zelensky agrees.
Меня это очень беспокоит, потому что не единожды мы убеждались уже.
This makes me really worried because we've been repeatedly convinced. If you want to know Russia's plans, look at what Russia accuses others of doing.
Что еще вы нам приготовили?
What else have you prepared for us? Where will you strike with your chemical weapons? At the maternity hospital in Mariupol? At the church in Kharkiv? Or at the children's hospital?
Half of Kyiv's population has fled the city, fearing Russian attack. Other Ukrainians, though, are arriving either to escape fighting elsewhere or to defend the capital. Oleksiy Goncharenko is a member of Ukraine's parliament. He's from the southern port city of Odessa, but is currently in Kyiv. I asked him to outline the current